Be'ezras Hashem, we're beginning the Maamar Samach to Samach, Tafshin Mem Aleph. Of course, the Shiur is Lili Nishmas, Rabbi Cholaki Gurshon, Rabbi Rafal Mנחem נחum, Rabbi Wagner, Olav Shalom, in whose memory Project Melukat was dedicated. The Maamar we're about to learn is Mugan Melukat Beis. That's what Project Melukat is covering. It's a Maamar from Yud Gimel Elul, Shabbos Parshas Teitzei, Tafshin Mem Aleph, the end of the year of Hakel. Many times, the Farbrengens of Yud Gimel Elul, or the Shabbos before, the Shabbos after, the Maamar was centered around the Sheva Brachas, because of course it's the Frierdiker Rebbe's anniversary on Yud Gimel Elul. This particular Maamar is on the bracha of Samach to Samach, the sixth out of the 7 Sheva Brachas. The Maamar is based largely on Samach to Samach, Taf Reish Nun Zayin, the famous Maamar from the Rebbe Rashab, where the Rebbe Rashab explains at length the meaning of this bracha al pi Kabbalah. The Rebbe draws on the central point of that Maamar to explain what is the simcha exactly that's being communicated in this bracha. What is the simcha that we're asking for in this bracha? Who are the re'im ha'ahuvim, and what simcha do they need? And also explains the whole thing, not just al pi Kabbalah, as the Rebbe Rashab does, but also very much in Avodah. And it ties into a very big theme in the Rebbe's Torah, that of simcha, and especially the union of Simcha L'mayla M'dida V'Hagbala, which was something that Rebbe demanded very, very much of the Chassidim. The Maamar was said in Tafshin Mem Aleph, Muga 6 years later, for Tafshin Mem Zayin. Because the Maamar is going to be centered mainly on the Kabbalistic meaning of the bracha, I want to just take a minute to talk about the bracha itself. The literal meaning of the bracha, Samach to Samach, Re'im ha'ahuvim, we're asking Hashem, please bring joy, and bring great joy, Samach to Samach, double lashon, to the friends who are in love, ha'ahuvim, not just ha'oihavim, not just they love each other, they're ahuvim, they're in love with each other. Bring them joy, kisamecha chayitzircha began eden mikedem. The same way you brought joy to your creation in Gan Eden in times of old. Mikedem, in times of old. That's the literal bracha. We're asking Hashem to give the chas and kala, who are in love, simcha. The way Rashi explains it, I have it over here. The Gemara, of course, is the source for the nusach of the Sheva Brachas in Ksubis, of Ches Amud Aleph. And Rashi, when he explains these brachas, excuse me just a second, to bring it up over here. Rashi says, Samach to Samach is a bracha l'chasim v'kala, sheyatzlichu b'simcha v'tuv leiv. It's a bracha to the chassan and kala, they should be successful in joy. It's interesting. It's like you're asking the Eibishter to make the chassan kala successful in their joy with each other. Later on, when Rashi comments on the end of the bracha, Mesameach chassan v'kala, he explains that this bracha is a tefillah, shemispalalim u'mevarchin, shayihu smeichim b'hatzlacha kol yameim. We're asking and we're benching them that they should be happy in their success all their days. That's why it ends off, Mesameach chassan v'kala. It's Hashem's title. He is the one who brings joy to both the chassan and the kala. And we're asking him to do so like he did so to Adam Rishon. There's somewhat of a debate in the Mefarshim, where exactly do we find that Adam Rishon was brought simcha. In the Avud Raham, who is one of the primary commentators on the Nusach HaTfilah, he just says, he quotes the pasuk Vayasem Sham, that the Eibishter planted Gan Be'eden Mikedem. Vayasem Sham es ha'adam asher yatzar. He placed Adam in Gan Eden, and it seems like maybe that's just my reading of the Avud Raham, that's also the explanation of Kesamechacha. The etzem fact that the Eibishter put Adam Rishon in Gan Eden was a source of his joy, and that's the tefillah. Just a couple of interesting things, because the Rebbe himself commented in multiple places on this bracha. The first issue is in the actual pronunciation of the words. If you go to any other wedding outside of Chabad, the pronunciation of the first word is not Samach, but Sameach. Sameach to Samach, Re'im ha'ahuvim. And in Sefer HaMinhagim, the Rebbe writes, Ki medume barur, it seems clear, as I remember it, she'omrim Samach kulei bepatach, that we say Samach, both the sin and the mem, have a patach, unlike the minhag in other communities to say Sameach. The Rebbe writes, there's also in a letter in Chilek Gimel, Igros Kodesh, things Tafshin Tes, Tafshin Yud, that minhagenu ukehira aschak much adash our minhag, like the Fidik Rebbe said, is loymar samach to samach, hamem harishayna gamkin bepatach v'loy b'tzedeh. The first mem as well, in other words, not just to samach, but also samach, and the first word is also with a patach, not with a tzedeh. V'ulay efsher loymar haremez al pidach. The Rebbe says, maybe we can say, what's the hint? What's the hidden meaning here? According to Chassidus, mepnei de patach b'chachma kav hayamin, ma she'en kein tzedeh b'bina. Patach, in Kabbalah, we have the explanation for the different nekudas. Patach is associated with Kav HaYamin, and Tzedeh, though, is associated with Kav HaSmoil. Apparently what the Rebbe means is that we want to be, everything in the chasana should be associated with the right side, less with the left. And the Rebbe adds, L'hoyer mi'inyan achaysi bas avi achlei bas imi vatahili li isha. When Avram was explaining why he married, or why he called Sarah his sister, he said, she's my sister bas avi, achlei bas imi vatahili li isha. She's related to me from my father's side, not from my mother's side. And she was my wife. I guess what the Rebbe is saying is we can read this pasuk as when the kala is associated to bas avi, the inyan of chachma is abba, versus bas imi, which is ima, then vatahili li isha. In other words, the inyan of a wedding is related to avi versus imi, more the right side over the left side. Which, as a complete aside, it's interesting to note, there's another shinui nusach which Chabad has, and that is that in Shabbos davening, there we say v'sameach, even though in many other siddurim the nusach is v'samach. So maybe there's a reason for that as well. The Rebbe doesn't deal with it. I'm just saying, here we have samach versus sameach, and then over there we have v'sameach versus samach. At any rate, that is the thing on samach to samach re'im ha'ahuvim. There's another interesting commentary on the last words, Began Eden Mikedem. Began Eden Mikedem, if you look in Rashi, in Ksubis, he just quotes the pasuk, Vayita Hashem Elokim gan be'eden Mikedem. Now in Chumash, Rashi explains that the word Mikedem means lemizrachai. In the east, that's where Hashem planted the gan. Vayita Hashem gan be'eden Mikedem. In the east of Eden, he planted the gan. So some, based on that, want to explain that this bracha is also meant to be explained that way. Began Eden, which was planted Mikedem in the east. And someone apparently wrote this to the Rebbe, actually, based on this Rashi, that he wanted to explain that Mikedem means Lemizrach. But the Rebbe, this is a letter printed in the back of Chilik Tes, Melukat. The Rebbe says that cannot be the pshat in the bracha. While it is the pshat in the pasuk, it's not the pshat in the bracha, for three reasons. One of them is that you should have said, not Began Eden, but Began Be'eden. See, in Chumash, Eden and Gan are two different locations. The Gan was in Eden. Even the word in the pasuk is, Gan Be'eden Mikedem. So if the bracha would have said, Began Be'eden Mikedem, then it would mean in the garden that was in the east of Eden. But if you say Began Eden, then Mikedem is not a descriptive term for Began Eden. The second point that Rebbe also makes al pi diktuk, it should say Bagan instead of Bigan. And thirdly, what the Rebbe says is, the first time in Torah it says Gan Be'eden Mikedem. Yeah, that's the first time we need to have the full geographical location of where Gan Eden is. But after that, Torah and Chazal are full of mentions of Gan Eden, never with that qualifying piece of information that it was Mikedem. So, clearly, in here as well, the intention is not to give us geographical information about Gan Eden, but rather to say Mikedem as it used to be, or in days of old, in ancient times, as you were Mesameach your Yitzir, as you made rejoice your creation in Gan Eden in times of old, so too make the Chas and Kala happy now. Now in that letter, the Rebbe doesn't explain why we would mention this point of Began Eden Mikedem. But in Tavshin Chav Gimel and Suchas Terah Dika Fabrengen, the Rebbe explained why it says Mikedem. Because we're asking that the simcha of the Chas and Kala should be the same way Adam and Chava were Mikedem Koidem Achet, before the Chet Tzadas. That's the bracha to the Zug Hatzoyer, says the Rebbe in the Hanach over here. That their lives together should be the way it was Adam and Chava before the Chet, where it was not Kenegda, it was only an Ezer. And then the house becomes of Shachanti B'Seichum, where the Eibishter can live. So, just that's some interesting tidbits from the Rebbe in the commentary on the pasuk on this bracha, Samach Tesamach Re'em Ahuvim Kesamecha Chayetzircha Began Eden Mikedem. Now, with that, let's jump into the Chassidische Pshat al Pi Kabbalah in this bracha. By the way, just another aside, there's a Rishima's Chiveres Kuf Chav Gimel from a chasana which the Rebbe attended in Tafshin Daled. Seems like some notes that he prepared for a drasha, which didn't end up being said. On top it says Lei Nemar. But the Rebbe explains why we're so into mentioning Adam and Chava at every wedding. The Sheva Brachas are full of, it's all about Adam and Chava. Yetzer HaAdam, Sheyatzer HaAdam B'Tzalmei, the whole thing with Adam and Chava. And the Rebbe talks about the whole union of Nivra Adam Yichidi, how every single person needs to be like Adam. The whole world is for him. The whole thing, Ayin Sham Barucha. Anyway, let's get to the Maamar itself. So, Samach Tesamach Re'em Ahuvim Kesamecha Chayetzircha Began Eden Mikedem. Make the beloved friends rejoice as you made your creations rejoice in Gan Eden in times of old. So it's explained in Chassidus, in this same Dibra Maschil, Shenemar Be'ez Chasanas Chak Muchad Mur. But Yom Vav Erev Shabbos Kedesh, Yud Gimel Elul Tafresh Nun Zayin, in the Maamar that the Rebbe Rashab said, by the Chasan of the Frierdiker Rebbe. On Friday, Yud Gimel Elul Tafresh Nun Zayin, the Re'im Ha'ahuvim Him Bechinas Chub. Who are the beloved friends in this bracha? Chachma and Bina. We're not even talking to the Chasan and Kala. We're talking to the Sfiris Alyenis. Chachma and Bina, Shenikrayim, Trein Rein, Delim Yisparshin, they're called in the Zayar, the two friends that never separate. And what are we asking in the bracha? Bring joy. Bring joy means that there are these Re'im Ha'ahuvim. That's their title. They're called the beloved friends. Chachma and Bina are in a state of beloved friendship. But they need to have Simcha. And so we're asking the Eibusha to bring Simcha into Chachma and Bina. If that's the Pshat, asks the Rebbe V'tzarech Lahavi, and actually the Rebbe Rashab asks this question really, as it says in Order 4. As the Rebbe Rashab himself asks the question, you don't need to bring joy where there already is joy. Moshe Rabbeinu came to Parai, and he did the magic trick, so to speak, of turning the stick into a snake. What does Rashi bring over there? Parai said to Moshe, Teven ata machnis la'afrayim. Mitzrayim is full of magic. You're bringing magic to the place of magicians. If somebody is already joyful, if not only somebody is already joyful, their whole mitzias is joy, what more joy do they need? Chachma and Bina, as we're going to see in a minute, are the epitome of simcha. They don't need more simcha. Harei Bina hi mekayma simcha. Bina is the place of joy. As we say in Hallel, in Tilim, the mother of the children rejoices. V'yodua de'em habanim koyal Bina. In that context, the mother of the children is referring to Bina. Shehi ha'em hamayledes asamides. Bina is considered to be the mother, which gives birth to all midas. The Alter Rebbe explains this right in the meaning of Tanya and Perek Gimel. That Bina, when you're misbayin in something, you take a nekuda of chachma and you take it apart into pratim of Bina. That's what allows your heart to become aroused with feeling. So this proves that Eim Habanim is a reference to Bina. And what do we say about Bina? Smecha. She's joyful. A state of understanding, a state of intellectual understanding is a state of joy. We see this clearly in personal experience. When a person understands something, good verstanden asugya, you're very happy. You pasha get joy from the intellect. That's as far as Bina goes. Bina is the Mekoyma Simcha. Bina is the place of joy. Even in Chachma, where actually joy, as it's experienced through intellect, is not really applicable. Because joy comes when something is revealed. When the sugya is open in front of you and you fully understand it. But Chachma, which is like a lightning bolt, is really higher than full gilui, higher than experiential revelation. So in a chinami, we may not have simcha. As we're talking about simcha kipshuta, harei b'chachma meir gili ha'enek. Well, we have more. You don't need a penny if you have $1. Chachma has something greater than simcha. In chachma, we have what's called the gili of einek, of pleasure. The Yerushalmi tells that a Babo once found a new tesefta, and his face lit up. Now, he just found the tesefta. Right? The Rabbi explains in multiple places. He didn't necessarily learn it yet. There was just the beginning of a gilui, a barak hamavrik, like chachma. And that itself was enough to light up his face. Because in chachma there's pleasure. The lighting up of the face came from the revelation of the pleasure which the finding of this tesefta brought him. And pleasure is greater than joy. So if you have something that's greater than joy, you certainly don't need joy. Bina already has joy, doesn't need joy. Chachma has something higher than joy, so it shouldn't need joy either. So what are we asking? Bring joy to the beloved friends. If anyway Bina has simcha, and Chachma has einig, which is even greater than simcha, they don't need simcha. That's one question. A second question. The Gam Tzarech Lov, we have to also understand in the simple meaning of the bracha, who are we talking to? These beloved friends, the Chassan and the Kala. And if we're talking Al Pi Kabbalah, V'yadua, the Chassan v'Kala himzun. Chassan and Kala are the levels of Zah and Nukva, Zah and Malchus, not Chachma and Bina, Abba v'Ima. So it seems to be actually a contradiction in levels, so to speak. You're telling me that Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is a reference to Trein Re'in Delim Yisparshin, Chachma and Bina, but the Re'eh Ma'ahuvim which you're talking to in the literal sense of the bracha are corresponding to different levels, to lower levels, Zah and Nukva. Umau HaKesher, the Peter Zeh, Shere'eh Ma'ahuvim Koyal Chasen Mekala Zun, in Peter Shanal, the Re'eh Ma'ahuvim im Chachma Bina. So how do we connect? The Rebbe is always interconnecting. There's two Pirushim in one word in Torah. They have to be connected. So here we have Re'eh Ma'ahuvim meaning both Zav and Nukva and Chachma Bina. How are we going to connect these two Pirushim? Now, in Ha'ara 10, the Rebbe deals with something interesting. When you learn the Maamar Bifnim, what it comes out is that Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is a descriptive title to either Zun or Chachma Bina. It's who they are. Zav and Nukva are Re'eh Ma'ahuvim. Chachma Bina are Re'eh Ma'ahuvim. But it's not so simple. In Tafresh Nun Zayin, which this Maamar is based on, there's an implication that Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is not a current title, but a futuristic title. It's part of the Bakasha. We're trying to make them into Re'im. Whoever Re'eh Ma'ahuvim are, we're trying to make them into Re'im. They're not Re'im yet. And so the Rebbe wants to kind of let you know that there's these two sides to the coin. While in the Pnim of the Maamar we're going with the gang, that they are descriptive titles, current titles. In the Maamar Tafresh Nun Zayin, there's a different implication. Let's see Ha'ara 10, B'Hamaimar Sham. In the Maamar there in Tafresh Nun Zayin, it says, that the fact that Zun are called Re'im is not because they're currently Re'im, but rather, Hu shal yedei simcha nasim Re'im, Zivugai hu tadir. Through the simcha, through the Samach, which is going to be brought, they're going to become Re'im. In the sense of the Kabbalah, that their zivug is going to be constant. Zav and Nukva are not always in a state of union. The simcha will create a consistent union, that's going to make them into Re'im. Ubir zeh sheba hamaymer. And that explanation, in the reason why Zun is called Re'im, that it's a futuristic thing, that beer in the Rebbe Rashab's Maamar, hu behemshech l'mashem mefarish sam lifnei zeh, comes in continuation to what he explains earlier, also about Chachma and Bina, that it's a futuristic thing. The Re'im koyal pnimiyus chub. That Re'im is a reference to the Pnimius of Chachma and Bina. Even though their union also only happens periodically, as explained in the Maamar there, because, as the Rebbe Rashab says, the meaning of the bracha, Samach Re'eh Ma'ahuvim, is sheyumshach hasimcha b'chub b'pnimiyusan ad sheyiyu b'vchinas Re'im. That the Eibusha should bring down simcha into the Pnimius Chachma and Bina, which right now, by default, is only periodically attached, and make them, they should become Re'im continually attached. So in other words, in Reish Nun Zayin, what comes out is that both when Re'eh Ma'ahuvim are a reference to Chachma and Bina, and when they're a reference to Zun, they're both Al Shem Ha'asid. It's part of the Bakasha. Samach to Samach, make them into Re'im. So, says the Rebbe, how do I get in the Pnim of the Maamar to say that Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is a reference to Zun, to the actual Chassan and Kala as they are, the same way Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is a reference to Chachma and Bina as they are. Says the Rebbe, Omnam lefi pirush ha'pashat b'samach l'samach Re'eh Ma'ahuvim. According to the simple meaning of the words, bring joy to the beloved friends. Shehatoya Re'eh Ma'ahuvim hu gam mikoidem. That the title Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is already existent. This is who they are. Shalachein mefaresham shesamach tasamach re'im koyal chitzenius chachma bina shezivugayu tadir gam achshav, which is, by the way, why the Rebbe Rashab says earlier in the Maamar, in his initial interpretation, that Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is a reference to chitzenius chachma bina, where they do have a consistent yichud, going with the Pirush HaPasha that Re'eh Ma'ahuvim is a current title, and we just want to bring them joy. So based on that, we have to say that the fact that Zun are called friends is because of the reason it's going to be explained in the next sif, where it's going to emerge that Re'im Ahuvim is a title that they're deserving of right now. In their current state, they're deserving of a title Re'im, as they are. And that's the approach we're going to take in the Prima de Maamar. So although in the Rebbe Rashav's Maamar there's room to talk about Re'im Ahuvim both in Chub and in Zun as futuristic, here we're talking about it the way it is, where they're both going to be referring to Chachma and Bina and Zun as they are right now in a state of Re'im. So the Rebbe introduces the beginning of the beer. We're going to answer the second question first. Before we answer why the Chachma and Bina need Simcha, let's first try to connect the two Pirushim, whether Re'im Ahuvim is a reference to Chachma and Bina or it's a reference to Zun. The Yuvan Zeh, HaKesher D'Shnei HaPirushim, Al Pi Ma Shekasuv B'Sefer Emes Li'Yakov Huva B'Maamar Anal. Based on a Sefer Emes Li'Yakov, which is brought down in the Maamar of the Rebbe Rashab. The Ahuvim B'Gimatria Doidim V'Him Zav V'Nukva. Emes Li'Yakov says, while Re'im is a reference to Chachma and Bina, Ahuvim is not a descriptive term for Re'im. It's not beloved friends. It's two groups. Re'im is Chachma and Bina, and Ahuvim, which has the Gematria of Doidim, lovers, is a reference to Zav V'Nukva. Ukiyadua shere'im imchu b'doidim imzun. U'masha kosuv re'im ha'ahuvim. T'tei v'asahuvim mi-behemshech v'teir shel re'im. Shekoi kanal al-chub. So if the Emes Li'Akiv says that re'im and ahuvim are two different people, then it should say re'im ahuvim, not re'im ha'ahuvim. Ha'ahuvim comes in continuation to re'im. Re'im is referring to Chachma and Bina. So why are the re'im being described with the adjective ha'ahuvim? So the Rebbe says, I can explain this to you in two ways. Re'im is referring to Chub, Ahuvim is referring to Zun. The reason why they're being kind of intertwined is for one of two reasons. Aleph, number one, Al Pi HaYodua, Be'oifen Leidas HaMidas Zun Me'hamechin Chub. Based on something that we know in Chassidus, in the way Midas are born from Chachma and Bina. Shebitchilahem Klulim B'hamechin V'achar Kachin Nimshachim Megilui. And every Midah begins in Chachma and Bina, in the Seichel, there's an Atiyah, what's called, right? When your Seichel begins to appreciate one approach or the other, leaning towards one side or the other, and from that emerges the actual feeling. So using that we can say, that Re'im Ahuvim is actually one big reference to Zun. The reason why we incorporate Re'im is because we're referring to Zun the way they're kolol in Chub. The Midas in their first initial stage. The way they are part of the intellect, the seichel. If you add the word ahuvim by itself, it would mean zun as they are in their state of manifestation. Ahuvim b'gimatria doidim, we're over there. Ahuvim carries the gimatria doidim, which doidim is for sure actually zun, not zun the way it's kolol in chub, but zun the way it exists. They exist on their own. Which parenthetically will also explain this gang. At the inyan of zun, the way it's doidim, Zun begiloi, is only there in a gematria. The gematria meiral miyut ha'erva'achayis miyut achamiyut. Gematria shows on a diminution, a compression, a reduction of the chayis and energy contained in whatever it is being created through the gematria. Ki ha'amshacham me'amidas shebemoichin re'im ha'ahuvim lemidas shebelev ahuvim begematria doidim, to get from the state of re'im ha'ahuvim, where the midas are kolol and seichel, to actual ahuvim, to actual zun begiloi. Daidim, not ahuvim, actual daidim. Zun, where the zun is begilui, it takes a gematria to get to daidim. From re'im ahuvim, from the midas the way they are in seichel, to get to midas the way they are in begilui, takes a gematria, takes a tzimtzum. That's one gang. Re'im ahuvim is a reference to midas shebelei, to midas shebemoichin. Ubei is the second pshat is the mikevan shehamidas in tulas hamoichin. Since the midas are born out of the moichin, the chubim aveim v'zunim benu bas. Chub are the father and mother. Zun are the son and the daughter. Kedisa bekabbalah she'aveim him yudke chub ubenu bas him vavke zun. Comparing it to the four letters of Eibishter's name, and we know that yudke is seichel and vavke is midas and malchus. So on account of them being the children, him mizdamin lahamoichin gam la'acharei shenimshechu v'nizgalu. They have a certain level of comparison to the moichin even after they assume their own identity. So we're not necessarily going to be talking about midas the way they're kolol in moichin, but we're talking about midas the way they are already on their own stage, and yet they maintain their connection and their similarity to their parents, to their source. First of all, a father bequeaths everything that he owns to his son. the inheritor, the heir, stands in place of the person who he's inheriting. Same can be said of a daughter, even though Apiteda, first the son comes first, but if there's no son, the daughter inherits in the exact same mechanism as the son does. She's bimkema moirish. Ubipratis, if you want to go a little more specific, habenu bimkema ava, abasi bimkema aim, k'mish kasov ki ima kibita, like mother, like daughter. It's a biblical statement. The Rabbi Yechezkel says it. So the son goes after the father, the mother goes after the daughter. The bottom line is, the son goes after the father, the daughter goes after the mother. Bottom line is, the children retain their connection to their parents. Based on this we can say, even after becoming drawn out and revealed on their own, they can be called friends that are lovers, also assuming their parents' title. Simply, that's the chassan and kala. Zun the way they are begiloi, mikevad shegam oz la'achrei am shachasam v'yizgalusan him daimim l'chub. Because even after being drawn out, even after assuming manifestation, they retain their similarity to chub. So, with this explanation as to why we say reim ha'ahuvim, even though the l'chayra ahuvim is referring to zun and reim is referring to chub, this itself creates the connection between the two pirushim. Because reim ha'ahuvim the way they are chub and reim ha'ahuvim the way they are zun are literally intertwined. Both in the initial stage, the fact that zun is nichlal in chub, and both in the aftermath, in which chub is nichlal in zun, because zun carries with it part of the identity of chub. So that's the connection between the two pirushim. V'yesh l'hoysef that Rebbe adds in Sif Gimel. Sha'akesher l'shnei pirushim b'reim ha'ahuvim. At this connection between the two pirushim of reim ha'ahuvim, the pirush ha'ikrihu shereim ha'ahuvim koyal chub k'muvur baruch haba Maamar. Elo sheyesh b'zeh oid pirush ha'koy gamal zun. Where the main pirush is that it's a reference to chub, but it also carries the additional pirush that it's also referring to zun. Hu gam be'inyan samach to samach. That it comes out also in the bakasha of simcha. In other words, based on Siv Beis, there is a link between both pirushim of chub and zun, but always in the way where zun remains secondary to chub. The main interpretation is chub, and it's just how zun is related to chub either by being included in it or by carrying on its identity. So in the samach to samach, in the simcha which comes to the reim ha'ahuvim, it also goes mainly to chub, secondary to zun. The reason that we're asking that there should be simcha in chub, the Rebbe kind of gives a spoiler alert for the whole matter that's coming along. The first question that we asked was, why does Chachma Amina need simcha? Don't they already have simcha? The bakasha that we're asking for, says the Rebbe, af shegam b'lav hachi yesh b'hem simcha v'oineg, even though they already carry without this on their own. They carry joy and pleasure. He should tumshach b'hem simcha nailis yoser me'ah simcha sheyesh b'hem tzad atzmam kedekam ba'arucha. The whole maamar is in this one line. We want joy over and above the natural joy. We want supernatural joy. We want the Eibusha to bring them a joy so beyond the joy which they have on their own. What is the reason for that samach to samach? What is the reason for the extra boost of simcha that we want to have in chub is to allow for a greater measure of gilui in zun. The second shot. So in other words, here too, in the etzem explanation of the bracha itself, it emerges that reim ha'ahuvim carries the main interpretation of chub and a secondary interpretation of zun. According to Chassidus, we're asking that chub should have an extra measure of simcha bli gvul so that it should be begilui in the same way in zun as well. And so now, having laid the groundwork for what's coming in the Maamar, the Rebbe is going to now, from Sif Dalet and on, actually explain the teichen ha'inyan. What does it mean that there's a simcha shemitzad atzmai on your own, and that there's a simcha that's higher than that, simcha bli gvul, and what is the nature of that simcha, and how this bracha connects to a physical wedding? Why are we saying this at a wedding? If it's a bakasha for chub, so beautiful, have this bakasha any time. Why are we asking for it at a wedding? Because it's directly related to that which a wedding is going to accomplish, as we're going to see Be'ezus Hashem in the next year.